Stranger danger versus reality. According to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC and CMEC, according to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, of the missing children in the United States of America, 83% of them have gone willingly with someone they know or they think they know. In the United States, missing children, less than half of 1% of the missing children in our country were abducted. Less than half of 1% were abducted. So, I see things on social media, people are like, oh, there's been a rash of cute blonde girls being abducted out of Walmart parking lots and taken into human trafficking. That really doesn't have anything to do with human trafficking. Yes, kids get abducted by the white creepy panel van by some creepy guy. That happens, we understand that. But that's a sexual predator or some other person who has other issues. That's rarely someone in the business of human trafficking. It is much more likely that a teenager or a preteen is going to get caught up in human trafficking via someone they know or someone that they think they know than by the creepy guy in the white panel van. So this is a little bit more of the story of Lacey and how this began and how this all played out for her.
Do you know Lacey? She was born in your town about 15 years ago. She lives in your neighborhood. She goes to your school. She's in your youth group.
I went to a private Christian school. Wednesdays I went to youth group from 7 to 9:30.
The day before her 13th birthday, a young boy known as a spotter approached Lacey in public. He invited her to her first party.
We were like, okay, well, we're going into 8th grade. We might as well get our first party out, let's just go have fun.
That night would change Lacey's life forever.
I was sitting on the couch just listening to music. My friends were off dancing and stuff, and some really cute guy comes up and starts talking to me. And he was like, okay, well, maybe I'll see you around.
He made sure they ran into each other.
I was at Starbucks ordering a drink, and he had said, hey, do you remember me? And I was like, nope, sorry, nope, don't remember you. And he's like, okay, well, I'm pretty sure I remember you.
He continued to stalk Lacey, learning her routine and approaching her multiple times in public places.
I went up to the Safeway, and we were buying groceries because my mom was at work, and I seen him there too.
Lacey had no idea these encounters were intentional. She thought it was fate, so she agreed to get together with him.
We started going on little dates, fake dates. I started thinking, he really did like me.
This dating period was used to gain Lacey's trust.
What I'd do is I would go to school on the bus, and then right when I got off the bus, I'd kind of just leave and go meet him down the street or something.
Lacey continued to see her stalker, and he slowly began to manipulate her more and more.
He bought me a dress, and it was just really special to me. It was I felt like I was like a princess, like the queen or something. And he used to call me his queen.
Stop, go are the only signs she knows. She's trapped.
He kept saying that he needed money, and he was gonna lose his cars and his house and stuff, and he's not gonna have anywhere to go. So I was like, I'll help you or whatever. And so we went to the strip club.
She had no idea that helping him meant he would rent her body out to lustful men of all ages, from all walks of life, night after night. But Lacey's boyfriend groomed and manipulated her. He changed her name, her clothing, the way she felt about herself. He forced her into doing horrible, unthinkable things.
That night, my first night, I got in the car with 3 people. I puked for about 30 minutes. And I don't know, I just couldn't stop crying.
Often Lacey was forced to have sex with 10 different men in one night, 6 nights a week.
After a while, you kind of get used to it, everything that goes around, it just doesn't seem out of ordinary to you because you've been around it for a while.
It's a night of breaking. when she should be young. She is now a broken woman. It's a night I'm high.
She's in your church.
And a someone
She's in your school.
she would feel
She's in your neighborhood.
hope again. Are there any years? Anyone at all?
So a couple little nuances there in the story of Lacey. Does anybody want to tell me how her trafficker knew she was at Starbucks, knew she was at Safeway? Any guess? Social media. So the story of Lacey took place a couple years back when kind of Facebook was just really the only big thing out there in that world. And you know, everybody was always, I still have friends who, it tells me exactly where they are. Turn that off on your phone and have that turned off on your kid's phone, that location thing in any app. Another little nuance that you kind of see a glimpse of with the story of Lacey is I would get on the bus and go to school and get off the bus and go with him. Lacey was never, at least initially, she eventually was taken away, but she was involved in this while she was still kind of at home, kind of in the school system. So kind of a newer thing that's happening in the world of domestic minor sex trafficking is that the trafficker wants them in the school, and part of the deal of them being allowed to still be at school and still get to go home kind of sometimes is that they will recruit others. Most of the time these young ladies and young men, they have a quota that they're required to meet. Lacey didn't talk about it too much in her story, but some of the other videos I use in other presentations, they're like, I had to make my quota for the night, and if I didn't make my quota, I got beat. The trafficker will say, look, if you recruit 2 other girls, part of what they make will go to your quota and you don't have to work as much. So there's an incentive there. There's some names for that in the world of human trafficking. We don't need to go into too much of that, but just know that sometimes it's not like they're chained up and with duct tape and handcuffs in a room and nobody's seen them in 2 years. Sometimes that happens, but a lot of times they're still part of our community. They're in school. There's a story of a 16-year-old in San Marcos, Texas. My daughter goes to Texas State, so I kind of had read this article. In the court documents of the 2 traffickers, one of their statements was, we would go to her home and pick her up anytime her mom was at work or asleep. So again, they would go get her. They would have her working in the world of commercial sex, and then they would bring her home. She wasn't missing. So that was a big aha for me when I came to understand that very rarely sometimes we see pictures of this handcuff thing. We don't like that, those of us in the world of human trafficking, because that's not the reality of what's happening for most of these people. It does happen sometimes, but the vast majority of the time, there's no handcuffs and duct tape. So the trap, the victims, they're looking for something. When I give presentations to teenagers, as we go through the videos I show them, I ask them, what was the bait? Our presentation is actually called Traps. And before each video, I'm like, now remember you guys, I'm gonna ask you what the bait was that was used in the trap. I actually carry around a mouse trap, and we talk about mouse traps and bait. And they usually get it right. And sometimes it's a string of little baits that lead up to the eventual being trapped and can't get out of it. So they're looking for love or protection. If they're homeless, they're looking for a place to sleep. They might be hungry. They might just want a place to plug in their cell phone. In the case of Brianna, she was looking for romance. In the case of Lacey, it was that fate of, oh, this is meant to be because I keep running into him everywhere. So they're looking for a variety of different things. And the traffickers, they're master manipulators. They can figure out exactly what bait to use for Lacey, which is different from the bait they're going to use for Brianna or this boy or this other girl or this girl. That's what they do. They figure out how to manipulate. And the target market for this, the beginning of this, is middle school. The vast majority of the time this begins for people when they're in those middle school years. Why do you guys think that is? Does anybody have an idea of why they're going after a 12, 13-year-old instead of a 16, 17-year-old normally? More vulnerable? What else? Say a little louder. They're going through changes, right? All those hormones are starting to kick in. What else? Longer use. You was going to say that. So, they're just beginning to kind of pull away from mom and dad. They're just like, I don't need mom and dad, and I don't need to tell them everything I'm doing. Maybe by the time they're 17, sometimes they've started to figure out that mom and dad do have a purpose in life, other than to drive them around. So that target market, it's that vulnerability, that hormones, and they're just beginning to understand social media and like push the boundaries and push the edges of things. And they very much want to belong, right? No matter how good things are in their world, they all still have that need for somebody to recognize them. So 79,000 minors in the state of Texas. Nationally, according to Polaris, we rescue less than half of 1%. So if we were to be really good and get that doubled and get 1% out, that means 790 in Texas. It means 78,000 plus are never going to be pulled out of this. And once they've fallen into the abyss of domestic minor sex trafficking, their average life expectancy is 7 years. I'm not saying that they age out and they're not involved anymore. I'm saying that if this begins for them when they're 12, on average, they aren't going to live to see their 20th birthday. What are some reasons? Anybody have an idea of what's happening to them that's making them have such a short lifespan? What's that?
Drug use, they drop down.
Drug use, right? So overdose, whether that's accidental or on purpose. What else? Not eating correctly, right? So malnutrition. A variety of STDs, sexual diseases, other untreated medical issues. Think about that. When somebody throws you down the stairs 6 times and kicks you in the head and beats your head against the wall, that's not going to bode well for your longevity. Out and out murder, you didn't make your quota. You tried to get away. Suicide. The buyer took things too far. So average life expectancy of 7 years once they're in it, unless we can get them out. And we're not that good yet at getting them out. So why do they stay? Like, why did Lacey, like that first night, right? Why didn't she just go, no, I'm going back home and I don't want to be involved with you anymore. I'm not going to strip for you. I'm not going to get in a car with 3 guys and puke. I'm not doing that. Why didn't she say that? It's called a trauma bond. I think most of us here in this room understand the meaning of a trauma bond. So the traffickers use a very deliberate system of breaking these kids down. Threat, promise, love, abuse. It's a very, very systematic, very designed process to completely have them lose a sense of who they are and to bond them to their trafficker. Or in the case of a gorilla pimp, he's just going to stab her and keep her on drugs. Threats and promises. Sometimes those threats are, if you don't agree to do what I've just told you to do, then I'm going to go do what I've been doing to you to your little sister, because I know where you live. Or one of the young ladies that we work with, she was told by her trafficker, he came back and got her after she'd been away for a year and made her come back and work. And he said, I'll come get your mom at her church, and I will kill her if you don't do what I tell you to do, because I know where your mom goes to church. So she complied because she was afraid for her mom. They have a complete sense of hopelessness and resignation. There's a story of a girl north side of San Antonio who ran away from home, met somebody on social media. He began trafficking her. She got away from him. She was on the streets. Another guy came along and offered her a place to stay, and he began trafficking her. She ended up with a third guy trafficking her, and she was picked up by law enforcement. The district attorney, in learning more of her story, asked her, the assistant district attorney, why didn't you just go home? You got away twice. And she said, how could I tell my dad what I had done? So in her head, this was what she had become, and there was no way to go back, because she's just been so destroyed in herself, of in her understanding of who she is. So shame, addiction, like you had mentioned. So either they're addicted to drugs and that's their supplier and they don't see another way to get out of that. They don't have anywhere to go. They've been taught by their trafficker that you can't go to law enforcement because they're just going to lock you up. And sometimes that happens because of other crimes that they've committed. Or let's go back to that slide of the buyer. Like sometimes it's been law enforcement who's been buying them, or that church person. They're not going to tell a teacher because maybe a teacher has been one of the people who's been coming and seeing them in that hotel room. So they've been taught and groomed by their trafficker that you have no choice anymore. And they believe that, because keep in mind, they're 13.